Harold Peacock is the historian, and he's going to talk about, yes, Philip. Okay, Philip Brown is texting himself silly today.
Right.
We're going to talk about the Ipswich's ghost steamer of the 1850s, a fatal career of this particular steamer. How are you, Harold?
Very well, Danny. Yeah, this is a short but fatal career, but it's really significant. So I've got to tell you about it.
I want to know about it. That's what I'm listening for.
Right. Well, I'll get into it. The steamer Swallow was built by Captain Taylor Winship in 1851, and it did a fair passenger trade, Danny, between Brisbane and Ipswich. Now, there were no horse coaches in those days, and so steamers carried to Ipswich both passengers and everything needed out on the stations. And from there, it was taken by a bullock dray to the various pastoral holdings in Westmoreton and on the Darling Downs. And the return cargo from Ipswich to Brisbane was typically wool, tallow and hides. So there's your history lesson. But in late 1851, because of all the traffic on the river, a body was seen floating in the river by a Mr. James Barr.
Not a dead body again.
Yeah, the corpse was that of a man who had been aboard the Swallow, returning from Ipswich to Brisbane, when, despite only having one arm, he went swimming and unsurprisingly drowned.
I thought he was swimming around in circles.
Look, on the Swallow, drinking with the one-armed swimmer was a shearer, Mr. William Kirby. Now, Kirby had been acquitted of a murder near Stanthorpe, and himself would die violently on his way to Gundawindi when his horse galloped into a low branch, dashing his brains out and killing him instantly. Now, the outlier was James Barr, because... well, he's the man that spotted the body. And that's because he lived to the grand old age of 101.
Wow.
It's not all bad news, Danny. Now, in 1852, a noteworthy passenger to Ipswich aboard the Swallow was Mr. Charles Cameron. Now, his mother was a daughter of Count Matthias von Brodder of Bavaria. Cameron himself would become chairman of Bundamba Shire Council, and his son was the first mayor of Greater Ipswich.
Wow.
In 1853, the people of Brisbane were shocked to learn that 9 convict pirates were marauding the seas of Moreton Bay. They were all desperate characters who'd escaped and sailed from Norfolk Island. The steamer Swallow was in Brisbane, loaded and ready to go to Ipswich when she was commandeered by Captain John Wickham. Now, this was the same explorer and government officer after whom all those Brisbane parks and streets are named. Wickham Terrace and all that. There was some delay in departing, however, because the engineer of the Swallow refused to risk his life by chasing pirates. But eventually the Swallow departed under the command of Captain Wickham. Now, we didn't find any trace of pirates and came home, allowing the Swallow to continue on to Ipswich. Now, in 1854, the Swallow had arrived from Ipswich and was berthed at the wharf in South Brisbane. That's when disaster struck Nanny, and she was sunk by catching under the wharf. She tilted and was filled by the rising tide. Now, 3 men on board escaped with their lives, but one was the steward, Mr. Richard Brandon. Now, he rushed back to get his money, but he went down with the ship and was drowned in his cabin. Now, lost in the bag were his cheques and money orders to the value of £100. That's almost $100,000 in today's money.
Wow.
And it remains a sunken treasure and never found to this day.
Where is it?
I can't tell you, Danny, but Brisbane, it went down over the wharves in South Brisbane, over by South Bank.
Is that right?
Yeah, but look, more tragically, though, was that Brandon had only just sent to England for his wife and family to join him, but obviously they never did. Now, the Swallow was refloated, sold and reconditioned for service. And so in 1855, the Swallow made her final voyage. That's when she was coming down from Ipswich, the cargo of wool and tallow. And, of course, tallow is rendered animal fat used to make candles and soap. Now, she was going at full speed to make it through the 17-mile rocks against the tide when she struck one of the rocks. Now, the Swallow broke in half and the stern and bow went down their separate ways. The wool and crew were saved, but the tallow was thrown overboard to lighten the load. The 20 horsepower engine was salvaged, but 2 or 3 casks of tallow floated away in the river and were never seen again. Now, the Swallow, to this day, remains the most significant ship ever wrecked at 17 Mile Rocks. She sunk not once but twice and left a legacy for Ipswich of death, disaster and animal fat in her 5 short years afloat. So, Danny, what else could we call it but a ghost steamer?
Mate, you built it. You crescendoed it. You gave us the death. There's always someone dying in our stories. And the floating body and the fat. Unbelievable. What a combination. What a story.
Yes.
What is your website to hear that story, read that story, and all the other stories?
Yeah, you go to historyouthere.com, and Danny, you can find History Out There on Facebook, Instagram, X and YouTube, but historyouthere.com, that's where there's about 500 short stories there for you.
Unbelievable. What a great story about the Swallow. And you've heard it here exclusively on West Bremer Radio. Thank you, Harold H. Be cock-a-doodle-doo at 8:19 on West Bremer Radio.